Planting seeds with strong roots, Yadgalu, into trees that will fruit, so all can eat to celebrate living.
Support for KVRX comes from Centro,
offering a daily caffeine kick,
quick bite options,
and Wi-Fi in an art-filled cafe.
Centro is open Monday through Saturday on the Drag at 2348 Guadalupe.
KVRX presents Local Live. Tune in to 91.7 every Sunday night at 10 o'clock for live performances from local and touring artists. You can also listen to Local Live by tapping into the stream at kvrx.org.
Hello again all, and welcome to Close the Open Eye. My name is DJ Generic. For those of you who missed our last episode, do not fret. Every episode possible is recorded and uploaded to YouTube. You can find all recordings on the show page under each episode's playlist. For example, for Close the Open Eye Episode 1, Introductions, originally done on January 27th, 2023, you can see that recording can be found here, along with the YouTube link, can be found at the bottom of the playlist after you click on the playlist. I apologize, folks. I'm a little tired today. I've been doing a lot of work for this show, and it's gotten a bit into me. But first off, KVRX, in accordance with federal law and FCC regulations, confines the broadcast of indecent material to between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Sensitive listeners and children are advised to tune out during this time. But if you don't have an hour to spare to listen to the last episode as a whole, or, you're listening live right now, to sum it up, the last episode covered mainly me and my personal experience with the open eye. Mostly my experience with them killing me. Though I won't just be repeating myself in this episode. In fact, I'd much rather take the spotlight off of me and over to someone else. It's time to learn a bit more about our antagonist. The group known yet hidden around the world. In today's episode, we'll be going over a bit of the Open Eye's deep, deep history. There's a good bit to cover, and cover we shall. But first, a bit of protocol and music gives me time to organize my notes. Lord knows my Google Doc is jumbled. Almost incoherent. Coming up next, though, we have Revelation by Hex Systems, here on KVRX 91.7 FM, HD1 and HD2.
it go. Pick out her heart with a kitchen fork, pin down her arms, and wake from the scar, still feeling sick. Where did it get started? Where, oh, where did this come from? Oh my God, my head's a gun. I let myself go. I let myself go. I let myself go. I let myself go. All your crying gets me down in the gutter. You were in the lost and found by another guy. Finally played you for a clown in the summer. That's when I came along. I can change your gray to sun in a second's time. I can make your sorrow fun if you let me try. Just put out your little hand, my darling one, and I'll give you mine. Cheer up, baby, baby. Cheer up now. Cheer up,
King Louis XIV from Secretary Michel Letayer. My lord, we've discovered something deep within the Mediterranean coast. After scouting the kingdom of Milan, a soldier reported to me that he had found a fortress on the beachside, a few miles off of Milan. It bore no marks of identification, neither country nor state, he said. I demanded that he show me the fortress immediately. I had hoped that it be abandoned, so that we may take shelter and gather an army in order to possibly seize Milan once more. But my hopes were misplaced. The castle was occupied by many. As we approached, I could see lantern light flickering through the windows. My men prepared their weapons as we went forward. The gate to the fortress was up, and we entered with ease. We'd begun to think that this was possibly a religious settlement, that the occupants were priests and such. As we saw a man pass by in a crimson robe, we assumed our suspicions were confirmed. But, my lord, these were no priests. The people within that castle, they are stained by Satan himself. We called to the man, and he turned, shocked, but seemingly pleased to see our group. His face was scarred, burned. He welcomed us to their home. Soon, more and more people entered our line of sight. Eventually, the entire courtyard was lined with them, nearly 300. At the time, I stood with only 50 men. The burned man approached us, and my men held their weapons steadily towards him. He laughed and, in perfect French, told us that there was no reason to fear. His tongue caused me to let my guard down, but his voice, it sounded as if glass was being run over by a carriage. I presumed that maybe this was a French outpost, but no, it wasn't. We were gathered into a great hall, and offered a bountiful feast of fruit and meat, every animal offered up on a silver platter. My men and I hadn't eaten that day, so we graciously accepted. Though, for whatever reason, I had felt ill. I had gone out to relieve myself, thinking that nothing was wrong right as the meal had begun. One of the other robed members guided me outside. I thanked them for their help, and as soon as I had turned around, I felt a sharp pain in my side. I looked at my hip to see a dagger lodged inside me. I screamed out and backed away from the attacker, who came closer. Without thinking, I took out my pistol and shot the attacker in the chest. I could not understand what was happening. I looked back to my side as my attacker fell to the ground, laughing, my lord. I shambled back to the fortress to gather my men. I came into the hall to see something that I wish I could remove from my memories. Something that I believe God could not let happen. Within the hall, the robed figures were massacring my men, their daggers slicing them to shreds. They bathed in my men's blood. I could not look away. It felt like years before I heard something. A voice. From the front of the hall, the burned man stood and yelled. He spoke in a language I have never heard before. In all my years, I could not even place an origin among it. Yet all the others understood perfectly. As they stood, watching the man, they all raised their hands to the sky and began to chant, Verum lauda, laus, visu, verum lauda, laus, visu, over and over. I clutched my side as I began to back away, but I fell back, landing right onto the dagger within me. It cut deeper, which caused me to yell out in pain. All the figures turned to me. The burn man then demanded I be killed, and all the figures rushed to me. I got up and ran. I ran and ran, somehow not being caught. Somehow I had found myself before a Milan hunting party. I attempted to tell them what had happened to me, but they could not understand. Even so, they took me in and have taken care of my wounds. I write to you from Milan. It's been days, and I'm sure you've noticed my men's absence. Should this letter reach you, please heed my warning. Bring as many men as you can with you, and destroy that fortress. Kill everyone within. What they did terrifies me to the core, and I will not be able to sleep until I know they are dead. Signed, Michael Letayer. This is a letter from War Secretary of King Louis XIV, Michel Letayer, dated around the late 1600s. And for now, it is the earliest mention of the open eye within known history. Which is pretty insane, right? The 1600s, before America was even a country, before anyone currently alive was even conceptualized, and still around the time when we were dealing with the Black Plague. Before so many insane things. You know, it's noted that most man-made advances were made in the last 150 years alone. This includes a lot of staples of modern religion. Yet, all the way back in the times of the Black Plague, there's evidence of the open eye. And they already had a good amount of members, weapons, and the ability to take down an entire French platoon that had guns and weapons of their own. Before we move on, though, there's something I want you to remember, or keep in mind. Théier mentions a man with burn scars. He is seemingly the then leader of the open eye at the time, of the events outlined in the letter. He is, how do I put this, important? And you'll see why soon. But until then, here's a bit of music while I dig up our next piece. You're listening to Close the Open Eye with me, DJ Generic, here on KVRX 91.7 FM, HD1, and HD2. Coming up next is Stars of the Midnight Range by Johnny Bond.
Stars of the midnight ranges, shining through the night. Stars of the midnight ranges, light my way tonight. While my herd is grazing, guide them till the dawn. Watch them while I'm sleeping.
a baby, I've come to say I love you and I always have. I find it so amusing. I used to be confused and afraid that you would never love me. Right, but now I see that we were always meant to be. You and me forever, planting lots of family trees. Counting out our children, half a zillion at least. We'll name the boys for you and we will name the girls for me. The sour peach of my skin, the sweetest poison I sing, so tasty it could wash your teeth and brain. The chaotic consumption, the diabetic gumption to do a thing that make me go insane and leave this plane of reality completely. Float among the clouds of pink and blue cotton candy. Let's blast into space and race around like aeroplanes, spreading multicolored chemtrails, soda pop and acid rain. Feel so neat, never wanna be myself again. I just wanna be sweet, sweet, feel so fun, never wanna come back down. Feel so neat, never wanna be myself again. I just wanna be sweet, sweet, feel so fun, never wanna come back down. Come back down. Goodbye to heartbreak on my birthday. Annoying boys who hurt me with all the stupid things they do and say. I can't even remember what I was so upset for. Spun sugar melts in water anyway. So no more crying, girl, those tears I'll end your pain. Soon you'll feel the cherry syrup running through your veins. Heaven is a grinning face with not a trace of shame. Take a taste of every flavor, favor anything but plain. Feel so neat, never wanna be myself again. I just wanna be sweet, sweet, sweet. Feel so fun, never wanna come back down. Feel so neat, never wanna be myself again. I just wanna be sweet, sweet, sweet. Feel so fun, never wanna come back down.
What's up? This is Lyra from Sweeping Promises, and you're tuned in to KVRX 91.7.
From the dark and twisted mind of DJ Unruly comes the newest and finalist season of Back Alley Phlebotomy. Monday nights at 10 p.m. you can tune in to hear me soothe you to sleep with country and gospel from the 40s, Japanese techno, darkwave, indie sleaze, and shoegaze, and pretty much anything else you can think of. Feel the pestilence of DJ Unruly through the airwaves. Tune in on KVRX 91.7 FM. Back Alley Phlebotomy.
DJ Unruly. Mondays at 10 p.m. Remember that.
We shoot the sick, the young, the lame. We do our best to kill and maim. Because the kills all count the same, napalm sticks to kids. Flying low across the trees, pilots doing what they please, dropping frags on refugees. Napalm sticks to kids. Flying low and looking mean, see that family by the stream. Drop some nape and hear 'em scream. Napalm sticks to kids. A group of gooks in the grass, but all the fighting's long since past. Crispy youngsters in a mass, napalm sticks to kids. Drop some napalm on the barn, it won't do much harm. Just burn off a leg or an arm. Napalm sticks to kids. Gather kids as you fly over town by tossing candy on the ground. Then grease them when they gather round. Napalm sticks to kids. Ox cart rolling down the road, peasants with a heavy load. They're all VC when the bombs explode. Napalm sticks to kids. Cobras flying in the sun, killing gooks is macho fun. It's one pregnant, it's 2 for 1. Napalm sticks to kids. There's a gook down on her knees, launch some flechettes into the breeze. Her arms are nailed to the trees. Napalm sticks to kids. Blues out on a road recon, see some children with their mom. What the hell, let's drop the bomb. Napalm sticks to kids. They're in good shape for the shape they're in, but God, I wonder how they can win with napalm running down their skin. Napalm sticks to kids. CIA with guns for hire, mountain grods around the fire. Napalm makes the fire higher. Napalm sticks to kids. A baby sucking on his mother's tit, children cowering in a pit. Dow Chemical doesn't give a shit. Napalm sticks to kids. "18 kids in a no-fire zone, books on their arm as they go home. Last in line goes home alone. Napalm sticks to kids."
From the desk of President Franklin D. Roosevelt to Lieutenant Selleck of the NDA, otherwise known as the Non-Disclosure Agency, January of 1944. Lieutenant, should you be receiving this letter, it means that you and your men are required once more by our great nation. You see, there's been a discovery in the Rhine of Germany. Deep in the Bayschreier Wald, some of our men heading to Berlin spotted a small settlement in the woods. They investigated, only to find a series of markings and symbols on the ground, presumably painted in blood. There was no evidence of any recent human presence. As much of the evidence left behind the settlement was old. Documentation of the symbols reveals a translation from Old Latin. It's a rather concerning translation. "Broken is the world, the light shall reveal the truth, and fix the cracked land. All nations will fall. Axis and ally will crumble under the might of the open eye." Now, this is not the only issue, as there were extremely confidential documents found at the burned site inside one of the small houses in the settlement. Extremely confidential documents. Documents that resulted in the death of all the men in the settlement that discovered it. Documents that I cannot, and state this with full disclosure, must not reach the public. It could result in not only a shift in the war, but a shift in the world itself. Whoever this open eye is, you find them and you kill them. The NDA was made for operations just as this. Enclosed are directions to the settlement along with other information gathered on site. Find these people and cut them down. Remind them of who the U.S. is and why we control the truth. We control who reaches what. Godspeed, Selleck. Burn this after reading. Signed, President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Correspondence by Lieutenant Selleck of the NDA, found on the desk of President Roosevelt, March of 1994. 44. These people. No, these aren't people. These things are unholy. They can't be real. They can't be real. We were trained all our lives to dispose of threats to national security and confidentiality, but this is impossible. This is beyond us. This is beyond everything. We entered the compound at 01 hours. The entrance was a small shack above ground in the middle of the woods. Inside the shack was an elevator that led my team and I down into the compound itself. Agents Mackey, Jacobs, and Lawrence were with me, while Agent Gunner and Dolores were taking point outside the shack. Communication became impossible with the depths of the elevator, so we could only pray the two were good on their own. As the elevator opened, we were greeted with a massive hall. It was made of pure white marble. Along the hall were statues of unknown figures, sculpted out of the same marble. As we reached the end of the hall, Mackey pointed us towards a downward spiral staircase built into the base of one of the statues, almost hidden away. Mackey approached and looked down the stairway. He noted that there was a dim light at the base of the stairs, but that they went quite far down. Suddenly, a scream echoed from the depths of the stairway. A cry for help in a young voice, perfect English. I was skeptical, but Mackey made a run down the steps. Mackey always had a soft spot for kids in danger. But what happened next? Christ. There was a tripwire. 3 steps in. Deep enough to be covered by the darkness, but early enough in that Mackey fell a long way down. Screams of pain and the echoes of impact after impact rose up towards us from farther and farther down. Lawrence attempted to chase after him, but I stopped her. I turned on my flashlight and pointed it to the base of the stairs. For a split second, I saw Mackey laying at the base of the stairs, broken beyond belief. His limbs twisted and snapped. But then something happened. 2 people came out from the dimly lit entrance and grabbed him. He was either unconscious or dead at that point. I'm hoping the latter. But they began to drag his body away. They took notice of my flashlight beam, which I fumbled to turn off. They looked up and spoke in perfect unison. "We are not involved in this war. Leave now, and you will not be harmed. Should you press on, we will kill you all." They looked back down and dragged Mackey's body away. We stood there in horror, and after a bit, Lawrence took out her rifle and began to fire into the depths of the stairs. She screamed in what was probably a mix of rage and despair after seeing one of my friends, murdered. She screamed at them, damned them to hell, everything you could think of that is foul. But when she ran out of ammo, a voice came from behind us. "This is your final warning, agents." We all turned to see a man in a red robe, his head obscured by a hood. "We do not wish to enter a conflict with you, or other agents of your caliber. So please, turn around, leave, and do not speak a word of what you saw." I almost visibly shook when he spoke. His voice was like sandpaper on a chalkboard. Lawrence, without hesitation, reloaded her rifle and fired on the man. I attempted to take the gun from her hand, but it was too late. I turned back to see the cloaked man standing, bullet holes throughout his robe. After a second or so, he fell, but he wasn't in the robe anymore. I swear he was, though. But it was empty. It fell down, flat. I heard his voice again. "You were warned. I apologize to the rest of you for your teammates' actions. Now you must all suffer." He was behind me. I turned back only to see Lawrence clutching her throat, a slight gurgling emanating from her mouth. She removed her hands to reveal a massive gash in her neck. In a choked voice, she barely muttered the words, "What happened?" before falling over. Jacobs and I had to hold back from checking her body. She was dead, but we weren't. Not yet. We took point, aiming our rifles around. We stood back to back. I asked Jacobs if he could see anything. All I heard was a sort of groan. Then he fell on top of me. I tried to push him off, but my hands, they went through him. I didn't understand it. I moved them and gripped his body, and shoving him off me only to realize what was happening. Jacob's chest had a massive hole in it. Almost the entirety of his torso. Clean cut. Nothing inside. Almost as if someone had just hole punched him. I backed away in terror. I couldn't think of anything. I ran back to the elevator. I didn't look back. But I heard it. His laugh. Louder and louder. Closer and closer. I got in the elevator, furiously jamming my finger onto the button up. I looked out for just a few seconds and saw him. He stood there, maybe 10 feet away. He stood up. Perfect posture. He smiled as if this was just a game to him. His face. God, his face. It was as if someone had left his head in a waffle machine too long. He started to run to the elevator. I prayed and just barely. They closed as he was probably only inches away. I bolted out of the elevator when the doors opened, and then the shed. I called out for Gunnar and Dolores, but no response. I ran to where they were to take point, and I only saw their equipment on the floor. But then I looked up. Gunnar was left tied up and hung from a branch while Dolores was flayed out, skinned like a deer. I held back my vomit as I grabbed their radio and called in for emergency extraction. I waited in the depths of the woods for what felt like millennia. Praying, hoping to hear propellers roar above me. And thank God they came. I jumped on desperately, and we took off. As I write this, we fly back to the nearest U.S. outpost. I plan to send this and all other documentation made of our operation to the NDA and the President. Whatever these open-eye people are, they're beyond people. They move like phantoms with the speed of Hermes themselves. I recommend a possible nuclear option, should that be viable. And I also recommend that that's where the correspondence ends. Selig's helicopter crashed in the German forest, resulting in the death of him and the pilot of the helicopter. Reports mention a large sigil surrounding the crash. This entry was found on the desk of President Roosevelt a few weeks after. Along with it was all other documentation done on the open eye by the agents. That, and a note. One we'll get to after this. Up next here on KVRX 91.7 FM, HD1 and HD2, this is Uranium by the Pearly Shells.
Uranium, 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 uranium. I'm gonna be a boy.
Oil's old fashioned, gold don't glitter no more. Hey, oil's old fashioned, gold don't glitter no more. Well, diamonds are common, baby, I'll tell you
and clung together then. Tomorrow was another day. The morning found me miles away, with still a million things to say. Now, when twilight dims the sky above, recalling of our love, there's one thing that I'm certain of: return. I will to old Brazil.
Dear President Roosevelt, enclosed is all the evidence your agents believed they dug up. In reality, this information is minuscule compared to what we truly are: a drop of water in an endless sea. Understand this, and understand it well, Franklin. Should you pursue us further, we will react. We will destroy your country. We will show you the truth. We will force our sight upon you. Do not force our hand. As a sort of taste of what our power is, I suggest you check your news wires. You're going to have a busy week, Mr. President. That day, documents proving the existence of the non-disclosure agency, along with what they helped hide, were released to the public. While mostly covered up, this caused a steep decline in trust in the government and president. This is where the first conspiracy theories arose, which eventually led to the complete mistrust of the government that we have within many today. All because some Black Ops agents stepped a little too far onto the dark side. That's obviously a lot to take in here. A lot. Few things, though. The grasp of the open eye has obviously expanded in those few centuries. That's a stupid term. Few centuries. They've gone from Italy to Germany. They seemingly have powers, skill, and wit beyond that of most normal humans. Not only going toe-to-toe with specially trained agents, but completely annihilating them. It's almost astounding, in an awful way. That, along with them placing a package on the desk of the Oval Office without anyone noticing. It's insane. But all that aside, I need you to look at one more thing. Beyond the murder, the terror, all of it. Who was our constant in both tales? Yes, the robes, the blood, the death, that's pretty much there. But really, who is the constant? I'll stop beating around the bush. In Tayer's report, he mentions a burnt man being a sort of ringleader for the Open Eye in their fortress in the 1600s. And in Selleck's correspondence, he reports that the man who killed his team, and most possibly him, quote, looked as if someone had left his head in a waffle maker too long. I feel that can equate to being burnt. Now, some might say that it's possible that maybe running the Open Eye requires a ritual of burning yourself. I say that's bull. I think it's the same guy. Why? Because his voice was the same. Quote, as if glass was being run over by a carriage. End quote. Quote. like sandpaper on a chalkboard. End quote. It has to be the same man. There's the obvious question, of course. How could the same man live hundreds of years apart? I don't know, but I've been scouring records, and I think I might have found an answer, or a piece of one. There's this thing, Incident Report 7A-4, that I dug up. I mean, this is back alley within a back alley kind of digging. From scanning it, it seems like an incident that happened in the Congo back in the 70s. It has open eye written all over it, both figuratively and literally. But sadly, we're out of time. So it seems our incident will be reported on next week. Until then, I'm DJ Generic, and you've been listening to Close the Open Eye here on KVRX 91.7 FM, HD1 and HD2. Oculum Claude, Cora Perry. Stay away from robed figures. Coming up next, You Are Part of the Problem by R. Stevie Moore.
Someone tell me what I'm supposed to do when the occasion comes around for me to prove I am good. I can't find the answer to the question, even though I'd like to demonstrate if only I could. You are just part of the problem. I must be most of the problem. You see this? About their inhibitions, but there's no solution at all. I would like to help, but I am usually too busy to prevent the way my friends want to fall. You are just part of the problem. I must be most of the problem. And consequently, the combination of your rhetoric and my ignorance only tends to horrify the situation to the point where the lifeblood of our relationship evaporates into the air on which we chose. I want to show you that I can't be any more inspiring. Just leave me alone until the time comes when I learn the answer. Then I'll write the novel about it. You can read the novel and the problem will be solved, and we can then go back to living in an ordinary way, and all the people all around us can say they are really happy that the novel was successful, and they know just how to cope with the day. Possible, impossible, it's possible, impossible, it's probable, improbable now. Possible, impossible, it's possible, impossible, it's probable, improbable now. You are just part of the problem.
You're wonderful! Thank you. I'm aware of that.
What's up? This is still Woozy, and you're listening to KVRX Austin HD1 and HD2.